بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين وحبيب رب العالمين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to grant us all the sincere intentions for gathering for His sake alone. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala revealed in the Quran, in Surah Al-Isra, سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى. Exalted be the one, meaning Allah. Free of being like the creation is the one, i.e. Allah, who took His most honorable slave, Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam, laylan, in the night. Min al-Masjid al-Haram, from al-Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, where the Kaaba is, ila al-Masjid al-Aqsa, to al-Masjid al-Aqsa, which is in Jerusalem, Palestine. Allah revealed, إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله, to al-Masjid al-Aqsa, which is a masjid that is blessed, and the areas around al-Masjid al-Aqsa are also mubarakah, blessed. Allah revealed in this ayah why Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam was taken from al-Masjid al-Haram to al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Allah revealed, لِنُرِيَهُ مِنْ آيَاتِنَا, meaning that this was to show Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam the great signs of the power of Allah. This first journey is known as Al-Isra because Allah revealed in the Quran, سُبْحَانَ الَّذِي أَسْرَى بِعَبْدِهِ. سُبْحَانَ الَّذِي أَسْرَى بِعَبْدِهِ. The word asra means to take in the night. So this night journey, it occurred on the earth. We have two parts. We have Al-Isra, which is the night journey, which was on the earth, not to the skies, on the earth. And then we have Al-Mi'raj, which was to the skies and beyond. So today we're going to discuss the journey that occurred in the night on the earth. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was taken by both body and soul. So it wasn't a dream. It wasn't in a dream that he saw that he went to different places and then he reached al-Masjid al-Aqsa and then after that he went above to the sky. It wasn't a dream. It was by body and soul. That's what that means. And this was a miracle for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. A grand miracle. A miracle, as we've discussed in one of the previous sessions, is a matter by which a person can differentiate a prophet from a charlatan. Charlatans, magicians, sorcerers would come in the past and they would say to people, because they wanted fame, they wanted money, they wanted the riches of the world, they'd say, I have been sent by God. And sometimes some of them would even make illustrious attempts to try to prove to people that they are performing miracles. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala gave all of the prophets a way by which to prove to the people that they were actually sent by Allah. And that was by giving them an extraordinary matter, something that changes the way things normally are, in a way that when they perform this extraordinary matter, they'd say, I am a prophet of Allah. And then nobody would be able to repeat that. Nobody would be able to do what they did, which would show that they were sent by Allah. So Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj, the night journey and the ascension, this is one huge miracle for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we're going to discuss. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, after the passing of Lady Khadija radiyallahu anha, and after the passing of his uncle Abu Talib, who was like a protector for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, despite the fact that Abu Talib didn't embrace Islam, he protected the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, when he died, that opened up the floodgates for the enemies of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to attack him. That matter that was preventing them from attacking him, this was now gone. Abu Talib had died. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was saddened, of course, by the passing of his wife, Lady Khadija radiyallahu anha. And so some of the scholars said that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, in a way of being a comfort, for it to be a comfort to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala granted him this miracle of Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj. So it was to show the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the great signs of the power of Allah. And from the very beginning, I'll explain and clarify that it was not a meeting between the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. If you recall from the previous sessions, we've clarified the aqidah of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is not like the creation. And therefore this means that Allah ta'ala is not in the sky. Neither is He in paradise, nor is He upon the arsh. So Allah is not in the direction of above. Allah existed when no direction existed. Allah existed without directions and without places. So the Prophet ﷺ wasn't given Al-Mi'raj or Al-Isra so that it would be a physical meeting between Allah and the Prophet, because Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is not attributed with physicality, shape, size, place, time, and so on. Allah is free of that. Allah revealed in the Quran, in the verse that I recited, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi. Subhan, this is something that is to be said specifically about Allah, which means that He is not like the creation. So right in the very beginning, this was clarified for us. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 52 years of age, now we're going to go through events, inshallah, chronologically as best as we can. So remain attentive, inshallah, and try to ask questions maybe in between, inshallah. If you know, you can answer. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when he was 52 years of age, and this was before the hijrah. So he migrated to Al-Madinah at the age of 53, alayhi salatu wasalam. At 52, he was still living in Makkah al-Mukarramah. So one night, he was asleep in the house of Hani. So it was the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, there was Hani, and there were other people there. Now the house of Hani, it was, relatively speaking, close to the Kaaba. Relatively speaking, it was close to the Kaaba. So he was sleeping there, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, between his uncle, Sayyiduna Hamza, radiyallahu anhu, and his cousin, Sayyiduna Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. So, to note, Ja'far, radiyallahu anhu, he was the brother of Ali, radiyallahu anhu. And Hani was their sister. Does anybody know the name of Hani? By the way, no, Hani is a title, like Abu Bakr. That's not his name, radiyallahu anhu. His name was Abdullah. Okay, Abu Hanifa, radiyallahu anhu. His name was Nu'man. Right. So, what was the name of Hani? This is a name that in the Indian subcontinent, at the very least, it's not very popular. But her name was Fakhita, radiyallahu anha. Hani, she was the sister of Sayyidina Ali, radiyallahu anhu, and the sister of Sayyidina Ja'far. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was sleeping there one night between Sayyiduna Ja'far, his cousin, and Sayyiduna Hamza, radiyallahu anhu, his uncle, and his brother from breastfeeding, because they were breastfed by the same lady. So when this was the situation, on the 27th night of which month? Rajab. All the answers are going to come from you, I feel. Okay? Rajab is answered 2 already. MashaAllah. May Allah raise your rank and protect you. When this happened, Jibreel alayhi salam came. And Jibreel alayhi salam miraculously lifted up the roof of the house. So imagine this building now. And when we're talking houses, we're not talking about terraced houses like we have in the UK. Big houses, huge houses. Okay, houses within which there are houses. So Jibreel alayhi salam came and he lifted the roof of the house. Can you imagine how strong the angels would have to be to lift the roof of the house? So he lifted the roof of the house, and by the will of Allah, not even a speck of dust fell on any person in the house at that time. So the Prophet ﷺ, he became aware of that. Something specific about him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, was that his eyes, they would close, but his heart would not sleep, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This was something that was specifically given to him. So he became aware that Jibreel alayhi salam has come. He lifted the roof of the house. Sayyiduna Hamza, Sayyiduna Ja'far, Hani, everybody in the house was asleep. And he took the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam to Al-Masjid Al-Haram. We had said it was close. So he took him to Al-Masjid Al-Haram. And there, Jibreel alayhi salam, he split the chest of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam without the Prophet experiencing any pain. And this, if you remember the seerah, the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, is not the first time. When he was younger, when he was with Lady Halima, the 2 angels came in the form of handsome men, Mikael and Jibreel alayhi salam, and they had split his chest. Now that they were close to the Kaaba, the Prophet's chest was split, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Jibreel alayhi salam, he brought with him a container made of gold that the narrations say contained al-hikmah wal-iman. Al-hikmah being wisdom, and al-iman being the correct belief and what strengthens that. We as Muslims, we have iman. But as we do more good deeds and continually stay away from the sins, what happens is that our iman becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. The Prophet ﷺ's heart was being prepared with or for what he was going to experience on that night. So Jibreel alayhi salam washed the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam with the water of Zamzam, and then emptied out what was in that container into his chest alayhi salatu wasalam, in preparation for what was going to come. Before this, to give you a complete understanding of why the heart needs strengthening, even though he had the strongest heart, alayhi salatu wasalam. Jibreel alayhi salam was once asked by the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said, or rather, Jibreel alayhi salam said, if you want to see me in my real form, my true form, then make dua. Ask Allah that I may be granted permission to show you my real form. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam made dua. This is before Al-Isra wal Mi'raj. So he made dua and it was granted. So Jibreel alayhi salam, he outspread one of his wings and it filled what was between the east and the west. When the Prophet saw that, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he fainted. Our Shaykh used to say that if we had seen that, because it's so overwhelming, imagine you look up and then like a blanket, something covers the whole sky. You wouldn't be able to bear it. He said that our hearts, they wouldn't be able to bear it. We would die. The soul would come out of our bodies. The Prophet ﷺ fainted when he saw that. Then when he came to, he said, "Oh Jibreel, I did not think that Allah had created anyone in this form, in this extremely large form." So Jibreel alayhi salam said that Israfil, meaning this Muslim who I honor, Israfil alayhi salam, he is much larger than I am. So the Prophet's heart was strengthened on this night so that he could bear what he was about to see. Then Jibreel alayhi salam brought an animal called al-Buraq. And this animal, it is an animal from among the animals of paradise. It is larger, or rather it was larger than a donkey and it was smaller than a mule. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when he was told by Jibreel alayhi salam to mount it, to get on it, the Buraq, it started to move around. It started to move around excitedly because this is Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. This is the best person that Allah created. This is the best matter that Allah created. The Prophet is better than the Arsh. The Prophet is better than Al-Jannah. So Al-Buraq, this animal from paradise, this white, beautiful animal from paradise, it could not contain itself when the Prophet ﷺ was about to mount it, because it was so lucky to be the animal that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would use. So then Jibreel alayhi salam held the Buraq by the ear and said to it, "Be steady. فَمَا رَكِبَكَ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُحَمَّدٍ." Nobody better than Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam has ever before rode you. And no one will ride you better than Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So when Jibreel alayhi salam said that from the blessings of his words, because he is a messenger of Allah among the angels, when he said that, the Buraq became steady. Now the Buraq is a special animal. And remember, all of this was in wakefulness. All of this was not a dream. It was by both body and soul. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam mounted al-Buraq. And Jibreel alayhi salam, who came to him in the form of a man, he He also got onto the Buraq. The Buraq is special because wherever it puts its front two hooves, or rather, as far as the eye can see, that's where it would put its front two hooves. So you imagine that. You imagine the next time when you're looking out into the horizon and you're looking at some of the hills or whatever is in the horizon. That's as far as you can see. That may be 20 miles sometimes. So the Buraq would cover that distance in an instance, in a mere moment. So it is special because it would put its front two hooves wherever its sight reaches, meaning that its front two legs, they would extend. They would extend to where its sight reaches, and then later on they would shorten. So the Prophet ﷺ, he set off on this journey on the Buraq. And they went to the north. So what's north of Mecca? Lots of things. Al-Madinatul Munawwarah. This is where the Prophet ﷺ went with the Buraq. And how many miles is Al-Madinah from Mecca to Al-Mukarramah? About 200, 270, 270. About 300 miles. So when the Buraq got there, the Prophet ﷺ was told by Jibreel alayhi salam, Inzil wa salli rak'atayn. Descend here, O Messenger of Allah, and pray 2 rak'ahs. 2 rak'ahs of the optional prayer, the nafil prayer. It is something good to pray 2 rak'ahs in blessed places. And you'll see that the Prophet did that, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So he prayed 2 rak'ahs there, without question. Look how humble he was, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Jibreel alayhi salam said, Inzil wa salli rak'atayn. So he got off the Buraq and he prayed 2 rak'ahs there. And then he asked, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, what is this place, O Jibreel? And so Jibreel alayhi salam said, هذه طيبة. This is Taiba. This is Al-Madinah. وَإِلَيْهَا الْمُهَاجَرِ. And this is where you will migrate to. This is where you will migrate to. Then Jibreel alayhi salam, he asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam to mount the Buraq once more. And he got on and he said, انطلق, انطلق, meaning lift off. Go to the Buraq. The Buraq had its orders. And they went to Tur Sayna. Tur Sayna, which is in which country? Egypt. So the Prophet ﷺ was told, Inzil wa salli rak'atayn. So he descended ﷺ and he prayed 2 cycles of the optional nafil prayer. And then he asked what this place was. So Jibreel alayhi salam told him, this is Tur Sayna. This is where Musa alayhi salam was given the ability to understand the kalam of Allah. The kalam of Allah which is unimaginable. The kalam of Allah which is an attribute of Allah. It's unimaginable. It's not a sound. It's not made up of letters and words. It's not in a language. This is the kalam of Allah. Whatever we imagine in our minds, Allah is not like that. Musa alayhi salam, he was given the ability to understand the kalam of Allah while Musa alayhi salam was in these mountains, Tur Sayna. Of course, Allah is attributed with attributes and Allah is without a place. It doesn't mean that Allah was in Egypt or that his kalam was in Egypt, okay? So this was a special place, a blessed place. That's why Musa alayhi salam is known as Kalimullah. The one to whom Allah gave an ability while Musa alayhi salam was at Tur Sayna to understand his eternal and everlasting kalam. That's why it's called Kalimullah, Musa alayhi salam. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam descended and he prayed 2 rak'ahs there. Now in terms of the chronology, there is something that I was not able to find. exactly when it happened. But it's thought that when the Prophet ﷺ was going from, so he went from Mecca to Al-Madinah, Mecca to Al-Madinah, then he went towards Egypt. Now, was this that I'm going to mention now, was it when he was going towards Egypt, Tur Sinai, or after he'd been, that he asked Jibreel alayhi salam, "Oh Jibreel, what is this smell? What is this beautiful fragrance?" So Jibreel alayhi salam, he said, هذه رائحة قبر الماشطة. This is the fragrance of the grave of the lady who used to comb the hair of the daughter of Fir'aun. And Jibreel alayhi salam informed Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam that in the past, in the time of Pharaoh, Fir'aun, the one whom Musa alayhi salam faced, there was a woman who was a servant who would comb the hair of the daughter of Fir'aun. Remember, Fir'aun used to say, "I am Allah." He used to say, "Ana rabbukumul a'la." I am your grand Lord. I am your high Lord. He used to say he's Allah. So one day as she was combing the hair of his daughter, the comb dropped. And what do we do sometimes as a reflex? We would say something like, when something small happens, we say, "Oh, Bismillah." The door closes really hard, you say, "Oh, Bismillah." Okay? So she said, "Bismillah." She didn't say, "Bismi Fir'aun." She said, "Bismillah." So this daughter who has been raised upon this filthy belief that her dad is God, that's all she's heard. She says to her, "Do you have a God other than my father?" So this woman, despite her knowing what Fir'aun is capable of and what he claims, she said to this little girl, she said, "Oh little girl, my Lord and your father's Lord," the one that claims to be God, "my Lord and your father's Lord is Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala." So that shook this girl. So she went, "Daddy, Daddy." She went off to Fir'aun. She told Fir'aun. So Pharaoh was deeply, let's say, perturbed. He was deeply disturbed by this. So he went to this woman and he said to her, "Believe that I am your Lord." She said no. He urged her again. He said, "Believe that I am your Lord." She said, "No. My Lord and your Lord is Allah." Who do you think you are? You're thinking you're God. Allah is your Lord. So then he started to use these dirty tactics. He went and he got her family. He knew her. She was a maid there. So he got her family, her young sons. She started with the oldest one, and he ordered for a cauldron to be brought, for oil to be spilt into it, and for it to be boiled, such that it started to bubble and crackle. He said to her, threatening her, "If you do not say that I am your Lord, then one by one I will throw your children in." So she said, "My Lord and your Lord is Allah." There are no two ways about it. Threaten me with whatever. My Lord and your Lord is Allah. So he ordered his guards to throw the first child in. This mother who had raised this child, perhaps for 9 or 10 years, her own flesh and blood, she saw this child burning the scholars describe that she witnessed the flesh coming away from the bone. And she watched as the bones melted into nothingness. But her heart remained firm upon the belief in Allah, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Again, he said to her, commit kufr, meaning, believe in me, say that I am your Lord. Still she refused. Like this, he threw the second child in. She had many children. He threw all of them in. And then when he got to the last child, the baby of them all, the baby that couldn't even walk yet. That's how young this boy was. He threatened her one last time. Now here, what happened was, she remained firm. She wasn't going to say that Fir'aun is God, of course not. She remained firm, but her character, which was very, very strong, right? She broke here. She didn't intend to say that Fir'aun is God. No, she remained firm on that. But it was the youngest child. She's been patient. She's seen one child being burned alive, a second, a third, and so on. And this last one is the youngest one who probably hasn't even said a word yet. Ma'asum, yani innocent. So here she broke down. So Fir'aun, he pelted him in two, this young child. And this woman still, she was saying, my Lord and your Lord is Allah. Then she said to him when he ordered her to be cast into the oil as well to her death, she said, I have a request. He said, we owe you a request. Because he knew that she'd been taking care of his daughter. So he felt that he needed to reciprocate that by honoring this request. She said, I want you to take the remains of all of my children and my remains and bury them in one place. He said, you shall have that. And then he ordered for her to be thrown into the cauldron as well. And she was martyred. Jibreel alayhi salam, he said that this nice fragrance that you are smelling, O Messenger of Allah, it is from the grave of that woman, the remains of that woman and her children. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, you can imagine, would have been on the buraq, and because he was either going to Egypt at the time, to Tur Sinai, or leaving after praying 2 rak'ahs, and there, this fragrance, it came to him in a miraculous way. Of course, Allah made it be like that. And if you look at the geographical location, it's still far away in terms of how far the palace of Pharaoh was. It wasn't in Cairo. It was more towards the north, a northeasterly direction. So closer to the Sinai, if you will. Anyway, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he was made aware of this honorable woman. Then from Egypt, they went north again. They went north to Jericho. Where is Jericho? Palestine. They went to Ariha. So the Buraq ended up from Egypt to go to Palestine. And there, Jibreel alayhi salam told the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, Inzil wa salli huna rak'atayn. Descend, O Messenger of Allah, here and pray 2 rak'ahs. This was in Jericho, Ariha. And it is where Prophet Musa alayhi salam is buried. Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam once spoke to his companions and he said that I wish that I could show you where he is buried, عند الكثيب الأحمر, next to the red sand dune. He said that I passed by Musa alayhi salam on the night of Al-Isra, and I saw him in his grave praying. Jibreel alayhi salam ordered the Prophet to pray 2 rak'ahs, so he did. And he told him that this is the grave of Musa alayhi salam, or that this is Musa alayhi salam. Then they went to Madian. Madian is currently in Saudi Arabia. This is where Shu'aib alayhi salam resided. And there the Prophet also prayed 2 rak'ahs. Then from there they went to Beit Laham. What happened at Beit Laham? Prophet Isa alayhi salam was born. Prophet Isa alayhi salam was born. Here also Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu was salam prayed 2 rak'ahs. Now the next stop is Baitul Maqdis, right? The next stop is Jerusalem. But there were many other matters that were mentioned in the hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that occurred. But it's not known by myself, at least, where they occurred on the chronological timeline. So the order of matters that I've given you now, that's the order. Okay? But now there are many other matters that occurred on the night journey that I'm going to mention to you that I cannot place on the timeline and say where exactly they occurred. So they didn't occur during the ascension when the Prophet went up, alayhi salatu wasalam. Rather, they occurred on the night journey. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, while riding the buraq, he saw many different situations. These are signs of the power of Allah. One of the situations that he saw was that he saw an old woman as he was riding on the buraq. On the side, he saw an old woman that was made to be there, made by Allah to be there. She was very old, but decorated, heavily decorated with jewelry on her fingers, on her hands, but she was very, very, very old. So Jibreel alayhi salam, when asked, "What is this, O Jibreel?" said, "This is an example of the world, ad-dunya. It's very old, and there's not long left now. Like for that very, very old woman, there's not long left before death is coming. But it's decorated with so many matters, so many distractions that can divert a person's attention away from what should be the goal. The grave, the day of judgment, paradise or hellfire, and how one should be focused on working towards that. But there are these distractions, these shiny things. How is it that a young child gets distracted by things that are shiny, right? Sometimes if you want to distract them from something else that they really, really want, you just dangle something in front of them. You dangle something, or you have a squeaky toy, you squeeze it or something. Distractions. So this is the example of the world. There are many things within it that would distract a person and take them off the rails. Distract them from what they should be paying attention to. As the Prophet ﷺ was on this night journey, he saw the devil himself. He saw Iblis, la'natullahi alayh. And Iblis was afraid of getting close to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He knew that he couldn't get to him. Imagine that. Imagine there's a person or something that knows they can't get to someone, like absolutely at all. Because Jibreel alayhi salam was with him. Jibreel alayhi salam once, when Iblis himself tried to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He tried to throw a stone on the Prophet's head sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he was in sajda. Jibreel alayhi salam came and they were in Al-Hijaz, Mecca or Al-Madinah. Jibreel alayhi salam came suddenly and kicked Iblis. He kicked him all the way to Iraq. All the way to thousands of miles, or hundreds at least, to Iraq. The scholars said, we know that Iblis is not going to die. But had it been the case that he could die, he would have died. A kick like that from Jibreel alayhi, just a kick alayhi salam. And he ended up in another country. Imagine that. You kick somebody, they end up through the wall. That's a powerful kick. What about if you kick somebody and they end up in a different continent or a different country? Ya salam. So he was afraid that if I try to harm the Prophet as he's passing by in the Buraq, who is riding along with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? Jibreel. And Iblis does experience pain. It's not that he doesn't experience pain. So, but despite that, look at his sinister nature. His character, his self is so evil that even though he knew that he can't get to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he tried to lunge at him. Even though he knows he's not going to get there. That shows one of two things, the scholars, they say. Either it shows extreme stupidity, or it shows how sinister he is. May Allah protect us from Iblis and his soldiers. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, as he was passing by on the Buraq, whether it was going to Bayt al-Laham, or going to Ariha, or going to Madian, or going from Mecca to Al-Madinah, he saw people sowing and reaping in 2 days. So they were planting, and it would grow. After 2 days, they would then reap, they would then take what had grown. Like for example, wheat. They would reap it and make bread after 2 days. Usually it takes, depending on the area, it takes 6 months, sometimes 4 months, sometimes 8 months for it to grow. So Jibreel alayhi salam was asked, who are these people, O Jibreel? Jibreel alayhi salam said, these are the ones who fight in war for the sake of Allah. They do that it may seem a little, but they are rewarded greatly. Like that man that came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the man was a non-Muslim, he said, O Messenger of Allah, should I embrace al-Islam first, or should I fight alongside you first? The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, Aslim thumma qatil. Embrace al-Islam. So he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Then he went and he fought. Maybe he was a Muslim for 10 minutes. Maybe. Maybe he was a Muslim for 6 minutes. The battle lines were drawn. It was during a war. The Prophet said to him, alayhi salatu wassalam, embrace Islam and then fight. Don't fight, because then if you die, then you're not going to go to paradise. So he embraced al-Islam. He turned around, he ran into the battlefield, and he was killed. Maybe he was a Muslim for 4 minutes. Maybe. But he has one of the highest ranks that one of us could attain, being a martyr of the battlefield. The martyrs of the battlefield, they may, because they are sacrificing their lives. They do it for the sake of Allah. They get this immense reward. As soon as a droplet of blood falls from them, and it's willed eternally that they would die in this situation, all of their sins are forgiven. Missed prayers, missed zakah, fornication, all of this is forgiven for the martyr of the battlefield, for whom Allah eternally willed that he would be granted this status. So the Prophet saw, alayhi salatu wassalam, this amazing matter. They would sow and then reap after 2 days. It was unheard of. So they would do what would seem a little in the eyes of some, but they would reap a great reward. The Prophet ﷺ saw as he passed by people whose tongues were being cut with what resembled scissors, two sharp pieces that were being hit together. Their tongues were being clipped with it. You imagine that? A knife or a pair of scissors on your tongue. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And these scissors, they were made of fire and they were cutting. Jibreel alayhi salam said that these people are the ones that spread evil. They chat and they chat and they chat and they chat. They spread evil and corruption in the land. They spread misguidance, deception, treachery. Sometimes treachery occurs between people who you may call friends. Sometimes it occurs between families. These are people who do not adhere to the rules of the religion. These are people who on the day of judgment, in the hereafter, this will happen to them. The Prophet, he saw these examples of these people so that we would take heed, so that we would be warned, that we would be afraid of these matters, of these things occurring. The Prophet saw, alayhi salatu wasalam, a bull, an animal, a huge, gigantic bull coming out of a small hole. He asked Jibreel alayhi salam, what is this an example of? What is this, O Jibreel? Jibreel alayhi salam said, this is the example of when someone says something that is incorrect and it harms them or another person or a family or a street or a community, then they try to backtrack. Then they try to, it's like the bull is not going to be able to go back into that small hole. Once it's out, that's it. Once it's out of your mouth, that's it. To be frank, you should have controlled your tongue in the first place. Where were you when you were saying those words? You were seeing red. Were you not thinking about the consequences that these words might bring, the hearts that it might break, the relationships that it may tear up, the relationships that may never be mended after this because of these wretched words that came from this person's mouth? Sometimes people, they think they're being the good Samaritan. They think they're being a good person by mentioning things that is haram to mention about some other people. Once it's out, that's it. And you know that person is then known to be the chatterbox. That person is then known to be the one who causes corruption in the land, causes evil. The Prophet warned us against this, alayhi salatu wasalam. He saw people grazing like animals. How is it that animals are they're on all fours and they are feeding from the land? Some animals, they eat excrement. Some of them eat other things that have gone off even. He saw people grazing like animals. And they were naked, these people, except small patches that were on their bodies. It's quite horrific. Imagine that. A person behaving like an animal. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Think about it hard enough, it sends shivers down your spine. He saw these people. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was told, these are the people that didn't pay their obligatory zakah. These are the people that didn't pay their obligatory zakah. So the advice to every Muslim is, for example, pick a time in the year, be it Ramadan, it doesn't have to be, where you sort out, you look at your finances and you say, is zakah upon me? A person would either ask so that they can learn the rules, or they would attend sessions like these so that they can learn the rules about zakah, whether it's for their business or for their private savings and so on. The Prophet ﷺ then saw people whose heads were being smashed with large boulders. Jibreel alayhi salam was asked, who are these people? He said, these are the people whose heads are too heavy for the prayer. Meaning that these people, they sleep when the prayer time has come in. And they know it's come in. Let's say that it's al-dhuhr now. Al-dhuhr has started. And they know that al-dhuhr has started. Then they fall asleep, thinking they're going to wake up. Okay, they have their alarm on, fair enough. They have their alarm on to wake up an hour from now when they can still pray al-dhuhr. Then the alarm rings and they say to themselves, I'm really tired. I know al-dhuhr is in. They remember, I know al-dhuhr is in. I'm really tired. There's only 10 minutes left. And then they start giving themselves whispers. Then I'm going to have to go make wudu. The water's cold. I have to dry myself. And then, maybe I don't have enough time. These kind of excuses. These people, they say, yeah, I'll pray it later. I'll pray it later. And when it's gone out, these people commit an enormous sin. Because they knew the prayer time was in, and despite that, they would fall back to sleep. Like that, if a person woke up and it's al-Fajr time, and they know it's Fajr, not like they didn't know. They knew it's Fajr, they checked the time. It registered, it's Fajr. And then they deliberately, knowingly, went back to sleep, believing that they're going to wake up after sunrise. This is an enormous sin. So these people's heads were being smashed. Jibreel alayhi salam said, these are the people whose heads were too heavy for the prayer. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam saw a group of people competing, fighting each other off. For what? For meat. Just like you might see lions sometimes fighting for the prey that's just been caught. They'd fight each other for it. Sometimes you'd see cats fighting over meat. But this meat was specific. It was a meat that had gone off. It was a putrid meat. They were competing to eat it. And all the while they were competing to eat this meat that had gone rotten, next to it, there was fresh meat. Cooked meat. Good meat. They were leaving that good meat and they were going to this disgusting, putrid, rotten flesh. The Prophet asked alayhi salatu wasalam, what is this an example of, O Jibreel? He said, this is an example of people from your nation who leave out the halal, which is, for example, by way of nikah, getting married. They leave that out and they pursue another path to achieve their sexual desires. They fornicate. Wal-'ayadhu billah. He saw, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, people who were drinking what was exuding from people's bodies. Can you imagine something coming out of a person's body, them scraping it, gathering it together, and then drinking it? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Jibreel alayhi salam told him that this is an example of the drinkers of wine, alcohol. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, Al-khamru miftahu kulli shar. Drinking wine, drinking alcohol, it is the key to all evils. Once a person gets started on it, then a lot of evils open up. What comes after it? Fornication, swearing at people, hitting people, murder perhaps, when a person is in the intoxicated state. The Prophet ﷺ saw people and he was told that these are the people that commit ghibah. These people, they were scratching themselves with brass nails, scratching themselves until they were bleeding. And despite them bleeding, they were still scratching themselves. They had large brass nails, long nails. He was asked, who are these people? He said, these are the people that commit ghiba. Ghiba, sometimes it comes to people's surprise. Ghiba is something, or ghibat also it can be said like that in Arabic. It is to say something true about a Muslim. Not a lie, because that's more sinful. To say something true about a Muslim, even if it's your daughter, even if it's your son, even if it's your mom or your dad, or your best friend. To say something true about another Muslim, not a non-Muslim. To say something true about a non-Muslim, to say something true about a Muslim that they would not like. To say that behind their back. So to say about your son in front of one of your friends, yeah, he's lazy. You know, my lad, he's really lazy. This is sinful. To say about your sister that she can't drive. Or to say that their house is dirty. Or to say that he walks funny. Or to say his nose isn't straight, his teeth aren't straight, his teeth are yellow. To say these things, which and they would actually be true. They would actually be true. But that person wouldn't like for it to be said behind their back. Imagine something in your mind. Have something in your mind now about yourself that's true, that you don't like for other people to say. Even though it's true, you don't like for people to say. When they do say it behind your back and it reaches you, that they said this and that about you, how do you feel? Yeah, that feeling. That feeling that a person gets, okay, it is haram for a person to commit ghiba about other Muslims. Some people, it's as though their job is to commit ghiba, 9 to 5. And then overtime as well, double shifts, triple shifts. It's like from the crack of dawn until they retire to their beds, until they cannot give an ounce more. Talking about the neighbor, talking about the butcher, talking about the baker, talking about the imam, talking about their children, talking about their nieces and nephews and how they have betrayed them, talking about one's mother and father, how they mistreated them, talking about... It's not an excuse for a person to say, well, I need to get it off my chest. How else am I going to relax? How else am I going to be content? Let me just get it off my chest. This is not an excuse. The Prophet didn't allow that, alayhi salatu wassalam. Some people, they do that. They might come to you and they speak to you. They want to get everything off their chest. And they mention to you, my mom is like this. My dad is like this. My cousin did this. My uncle did this. My husband does this. Or my wife does this. When all those things are true, no one's saying it's a lie. It's true. But that other person wouldn't like it. So the Prophet judged this to be haram. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Once, one of the wives of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, she gestured. She didn't even say anything. She gestured. And she gestured to indicate that one of the other wives of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is not tall. So she went like this. Like that. Like she's the really short one. And she wasn't doing it for identification purposes. She was saying, yeah, she's short. So the Prophet ﷺ said, if you were to mix this word, this gesture that you made, if you were to mix it in with the ocean would be stained. Meaning that this that you did has a stench. This is a type of ghiba. Yes, she may not be tall, right? But for you to say she's short and you know that she doesn't like it, this is haram. Even if, the scholar said, even if the child was a day old, to go and see the child, go and see the baby in the hospital, to go home and to say to your wife, yes, that baby was a little ugly. It's haram. It's haram. Why? Because it's a Muslim. And if that Muslim was older, they would not like for that to be said about them behind their back. So many people misunderstand what ghiba means. They say, but I'm not lying, it's true. What, you want to pound the back for telling the truth? No, even telling the truth sometimes behind someone's back, it is haram. It's not permissible. The companions of the Prophet ﷺ asked him, they said, O Messenger of Allah, وَإِن كَانَ فِي أَخِي مَا أَقُولُ, what if I say something that's actually true? It's actually true about my Muslim brother or sister or mom or dad or son or daughter, and I mention it behind their back. What if it's actually true? I'm not lying. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, if you do that, then you know it's ghiba. Then you know it's ghiba. And it doesn't save a person to say, well, I'll say it to his face. That doesn't save a person from the sin. And this is one of the sins for which a person is punished in the grave. So the Prophet ﷺ saw these people scratching themselves. Then the Prophet ﷺ reached Bayt al-Maqdis, which is Jerusalem. There, Jibreel ﷺ, he punctured a hole in the wall, and there he tied the buraq. And this is the Western Wall. The Western Wall, which is also known as the Wailing Wall and the Buraq Wall, for obvious reasons. And so they went into Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Imagine this now. The Prophet ﷺ was ushered forward by Jibreel ﷺ to lead all of the prophets in prayer. Right? Imagine who is there. You have Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, fine. You have the man for whom the Red Sea split, and 600,000 people crossed it, and 6 million people who were the people of Pharaoh drowned. This man, Musa alayhi salam, was in that gathering praying behind the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. In this gathering also praying behind Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was the man who resurrected 4 people. 4 people. That's Isa alayhi salam. 4 people he brought back to life by the will of Allah. In this gathering, there was Nuh alayhi salam, who took safe haven on board the ark, along with about 80 other people and his sons and their wives, as the rest of the world drowned. In this gathering, there was Prophet Zakaria alayhi salam, who witnessed the extraordinary matters that occurred to Lady Maryam alayhi salam. Among these people, there was Adam alayhi salam, who is the prophet that has lived in paradise and then after that had to come down to the earth. He is the only person, Adam alayhi salam, the first person, Adam alayhi salam, along with his wife, who experienced paradise. Then they had to come down to the earth, and for the first ever time, after being in paradise, they experienced hunger. They experienced extreme heat on the earth. They experienced being cold, being sick, being ill. Adam alayhi salam was in that gathering. You had Idris, you had Hud, Salih, Shu'aib, Yusuf, Yunus, Yaqub, Ismail, Ibrahim, Ishaq, Binyamin, Sulaiman, Dawood, Hizqil, Sham'un, and Khadir. All of these prophets, they prayed behind Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, which shows that he is the best of them. Jibreel ushered him forward. After they prayed, and all of the prophets were brought out of their graves, except Isa alayhi salam, who was brought down from the sky where he is now, and Al-Khadir, who lives on the water alayhi salam. Then after this, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam went to now where the golden dome is, As-Sakhra. He stepped onto that stone, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and then from here, the Mi'raj begins. From here, the ascension and what comes next begins. We'll stop here and continue next week, but remember, the Prophet ﷺ did not go on the night journey and the ascension by body and soul to meet physically with Allah. Allah is not bound by time. Allah is not like the creation. And it's not, as some people claim, a'udhu billah, they say Allah missed the Prophet. Allah longed for the Prophet, yearned for the Prophet. This is kufr. You can't attribute feelings to Allah. Allah created us with being being angry, being in love, hating. You can't attribute missing, longing, and yearning to Allah. Allah doesn't have a heart. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is the creator of hearts. Allah doesn't yearn and long and miss, because this is what He created for the creation. So this is a misconception that some people have. They say Allah missed the Prophet, so He invited him up. Allah is not in the sky, and Allah is not like the creation. He is not attributed with the attributes of the creation. Next week, inshaAllah ta'ala, we'll mention Al-Mi'raj, the ascension to the skies and beyond, and mention what the Prophet ﷺ saw. Let's say La ilaha illallah and as-salah ala al-nabi. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Barakallahu bikum.